Today on Millennial,
he believes the best way we can help create a more inclusive world is through the inspiring content we produce, bro.
There's so many gays in Disney films, right?
Yeah, I mean, think of that little lesbian kiss in the background of the one Star Wars movie, blink and you miss it. Yeah, you know, we're impacting lots of change.
Rising shares of Americans see women raising children on their own as bad for society.
I'm particularly surprised because it's not like divorce rates are going down. So what do all of these people think happens to those children?
I mean, you wrote in the notes, wouldn't it be nice to see how people react to your death?
Look, it's been a long day. That's what I was feeling at the moment when I wrote that, okay? Welcome to Millennial, the home of fake adulting but real talk. I'm Andrew.
I'm Laura.
And I'm Pamela.
We had big news break today, and I said, we gotta talk about this today. I actually can't believe I'm gonna say this. The Senate just unanimously passed a bill to make daylight saving time permanent.
Yay!
It now goes to the House, where it's likely to be passed. At least this tweet I'm reading says it's likely to be passed. And then that's it. We're not going to be changing the clocks anymore. To be clear, daylight saving time is the time we're in now. We're going to keep the clocks an hour ahead, so to speak. This is shocking.
Yeah, a little bit of a caveat there. I believe that the Senate bill is written to say that this doesn't start until 2023.
Okay.
So we would still fall back this fall and then spring forward one more time in 2023. And then it's final, assuming it passes the House and there aren't any revisions made to it. But yeah, I'm super excited about this. I'm sure everyone who's been with this show since the beginning remembers that around this time every year I bitch and complain because I fucking hate the time change so much. I think it's a waste of time. There's an increase in accidents that happen around both time changes every year. There's a decrease in productivity, and my sleep schedule is fucked up for a solid week afterwards. Not a fan. This last week has been really hard for me with the switch back to daylight savings time. So I'm just personally really happy for myself. This was a big day for me.
Wow, that was a very dramatic remark on all this. Yep. People are already complaining about making daylight saving time permanent because some people prefer that extra hour of sun in the morning during the winter. I get that. But what this comes down to is, what do you prefer? Do you want that extra hour of sun in the morning during winter, or do you want that extra hour of sun in the evening? Personally, I want it in the evening. Some people are saying, oh, morning people want the sun up earlier in the morning. I'm a morning person. I actually don't mind the sun not being up until a little later. Because I'm a morning person because, I just enjoy the mornings. I don't care if the sun is up or not. I actually get excited when I'm awake before the sun is up. It feels like, you're up before the new day. I think the question is, when are you more miserable, in the morning or at night? Me, sun after work is better. That then improves my mood.
I agree. I hate getting off work when it's dark.
Yeah, I was going to say it's also just nice because there's no adjustment period. I know that it's just an hour, but it does mess everything up. All of us are dog owners, for example. Like my dog hates daylight savings time when we fall back because he's like, it's my dinner time, but it's not his dinner time because we're off an hour.
Oh,
Jasper's
I didn't
pretty
even
smart.
think about that.
Dang. Brooklyn is not smart enough.
I know. Everybody says that dogs can't tell time, but my dog starts doing his little food dance 30 minutes before he's supposed to get fed. So I don't know what to tell you all.
So dogs will be lobbying for this bill to not pass.
Yeah, and me and my sanity.
To be fair, one common critique of this is for parents with school-age children who have concerns about their kids waiting for the school bus in the dark, potentially in the winter months. And I empathize with that. If I had a small child, I don't know how comfortable I'd be with that. But to be honest, I'm thinking back on my childhood, and I feel like it was pretty dark when I was commuting to school too.
Yes.
maybe I'm misremembering this. I don't know what the difference is.
Well, no, I mean,
I think that they've changed the hours that school start, at least in
Yeah,
California.
they
I know
could
they
do
just
that.
passed.
Oh,
That it's
yeah.
actually later now. But I also remember getting up at like 6:30 to get ready for school and getting, starting classes at 8. So
I had a couple years where I was the first person to be picked up on the bus route. So I had to be out there by like 6:30. And yeah, there were some mornings where I was waiting for the bus before the sun came up. But everybody's going to have a different situation. Everybody's going to have different pickup times for the bus. So we can't make a decision based on that, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, and also, the time zone, your time zone, that's a whole other thing, but it's all going to be relative depending on how far east or how far west you are in your time zone. If you're further east, the sun is always going to rise earlier. It doesn't matter what you do to the clocks. That's just always going to be the case.
Yeah.
But Andrew, I think you brought up that this was something that we actually tried in the 1970s, and apparently people didn't like it very much.
Yeah, we tried it for 2 years, and a couple of the reasons that we're mentioning, because the sun didn't come up in time for people to wait for the bus, and it looks like there was an increase in car accidents. But this is back in the 70s. I mean, car technology, hell, car headlights are different now. I have to think some streets are better lit since 1974. I just feel like we can't not do this just because there may have been increases in car crashes 50 years ago. It's a very different world that we live in. Everybody's staring at their cell phones now while driving. It's going to be way safer.
It was also funny because I was reading this article and it quoted, I think it was the Secretary of Transportation at the time under the administration, who was like, yeah, I mean, we're seeing more accidents in the morning, but before we changed this, we were seeing more accidents in the evening because it was dark then. And he was like, yeah, after that, people are tired after work and they've probably had a couple drinks too. So it's way riskier. I just had a chuckle when I read that. It was like, wow, what a different time where somebody, a public official would be like, yeah, it's totally normal that people are driving with a couple drinks in their system.
Yeah.
It would never happen now.
I'm wondering what this is going to do for sales of those alarm clocks that have lights on them and slowly fade on to help wake you up. Like, there's going to be so many people suddenly buying those once this bill passes and we face some long winter nights. But yeah, so I think everybody here is very excited about it. It's exciting to see Congress unanimously pass something, especially something that people complain about all the time. It's just nice to see America united for the most part behind something. And who knows, maybe, I'm sure some people will not like this time change, but you just gotta look at the bright side when it comes up an hour later and stays up an hour later in the day.
And like everything, people will adjust and we'll just stop complaining about it one way or the other. So
yeah, and we'll find something new to complain about.
Yeah, and again, like, it's not that bad to wake up before the sun. Buy some new light bulbs. Like,
I'm not a morning person, so
so this doesn't affect Laura at all.
Yeah,
when do you wake up?
Selfishly, this does not affect me at all. I much prefer to have more daylight on the end of my day, so I'm not leaving work when it's dark.
Yeah,
and
it's
also,
depressing.
so in the winter, I don't want the sun setting at 4:30.
Yeah, that freaking sucks.
It's so depressing.
I've been high on life the past couple days because the sun hasn't set till like 6:30.
I know.
I know it's not going to be exactly that same way all year, but it's better than it is now.
It's been setting at 7:45 here.
There you
which
go.
I love. It's so nice.
And you've got 3-4 more months of this till the summer solstice. So just
Yep.
it's only up from here, baby.
Mm-hmm.
The war in Ukraine is ongoing, of course. What we're going to try to do on the show going forward, because obviously, unfortunately, this isn't going to be ending anytime soon. We're going to try to bring up Ukraine every other week instead of focusing on it every week, just so everybody knows what to expect from us. Laura, what have you noticed in regards to Ukraine in the last couple weeks?
Yeah, something that was a trend sort of early on in the news cycle on Ukraine, but also has continued being a theme, is that African refugees who were sort of residing in Ukraine reported experiencing racism when trying to flee Ukraine. We actually have an article from NBC News on it that we'll put in the show notes, but you can find a lot of other sources talking about this, where there was sort of this tendency towards telling African refugees to, wait and let real Ukrainians through. And a lot of the African refugees interviewed for these pieces noted that nobody was checking passports. So they were like, well, what do you, you're not checking passports, so you don't know who's Ukrainian and who's not. So I think you actually just mean white. So that's just been really appalling to see. It's, a situation where nobody wants to stay there and be sort of in the crossfire of the situation. And it's just an unfortunate sort of, I guess, side effect of everything that's going on right now, that people in some cases are so panicked that they're falling back on old tropes and things like that. And this goes back to just sort of the general acknowledgement that we had a few weeks ago when we first covered this story, that there are, a number of minority groups that are having scary moments in Ukraine right now. We talked about how this is really scary for Jewish people. Ukraine has a very large Jewish population, and some of the early rhetoric that came out of Moscow saying that they were going to denazify Ukraine when Ukraine has a Jewish president and a very large Jewish population, and those people sort of seeing the potential of World War III knocking on their door was pretty frightening. So those were just a couple of things that I wanted to make sure to bring up, because it feels like they're not getting a ton of discussion in the press. It's a lot of the drama, you're hearing about how Russia has put sanctions on Joe Biden and several members of his administration, as though that even means anything. None of them are planning a trip to Russia anytime soon. So I just think it's important to kind of highlight the human interest side of this story, and just remember that these are real people, facing really serious, human rights violations if, forced to stay in Ukraine or if they're unable to get out. So just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah. Thank you for doing so. And it's horrible that's going on. Unfortunately, there have also been some ceasefires that have been organized, but they all fell very quickly. So it's just been very difficult for people to get out if they want to.
Yeah.
Pam, there was an angle that you wanted to discuss too in regards to Ukraine.
Yeah, this is far less, impactful than what Laura brought up, which is a very serious issue. But obviously, we've all seen the headlines of countries putting different sanctions on Russia. But one of the things that I found particularly interesting was that Hollywood studios clearly did not want to get left behind here. So this actually started with Disney, and then Sony, Warner Brothers, and Paramount all followed suit fairly quickly when Disney announced that they were actually going to be halting the theatrical release rollouts in Russia. Like I said, the other studios also followed suit. Some of the titles being held back currently are pretty big releases. So this is fairly significant, if only because, people are just kind of getting back to cinema. So if anybody's really going to lose the most money here, it's these studios. So make of that what you will. But some of the titles that will not be released in Russia until who knows when include Turning Red, which just came out over on Disney Plus, The Batman, which is huge for Warner Brothers, Morbius, which stars Jared Leto. It's another comic book movie coming out from Sony, The Lost City, which is a rom-com starring Sandra Bullock, Channing Tatum, and Daniel Radcliffe, and then Sonic the Hedgehog 2 as well. So there are some other titles that have been released in subsequent weeks since this news broke. To give you all a little bit of perspective, on average, when you look at global ticket sales, the Russian market counts for about 3%. But then when you look at the importing of movies, Hollywood movies actually amount for about 70% of films shown in Russia overall. So even though global ticket sales in Russia are not as significant as, say, China, which is a much bigger market, and we've talked about that before, it is slightly significant in making sure that there's no revenue coming in from these megaplexes that could be showing these movies that could then be, turned over to the Russian government that could then use that money to fund some more military efforts. So I guess that's the angle here, even though it seems a little bit silly on the face of things to be like holding back movie releases.
Because my big question has been, why are all these companies, these studios pulling out? Because you also hear about McDonald's, Starbucks, Coca-Cola. I'm looking through another list. IKEA is closing, H&M, Tommy Hilfiger, like all of these European Western countries or companies are pulling out their business. And I've been wondering, well, what is it for? Because really, pulling out, and Visa and MasterCard said they're shutting down services. So that shuts out a lot of people who use these credit cards over there. It's all just punishing Russians who don't want this war anyway. My only alternate theory was what? The companies are saying, well, we're all going to pull out, and the Russians are going to get so pissed off that they're being shut out from the rest of the world. They're going to, stand up and protest more or fight Putin. I mean, Lindsey Graham is literally calling for somebody to assassinate Putin. That's not what the companies want, of course, but what do they accomplish by doing this?
There's a couple of ways you can look at this. First and foremost, I think a lot of companies want to be aligned with whatever their country is doing. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if you're a company in the United States that was continuing to do business in Russia, that wouldn't be a great look overall. But
right.
I also wouldn't want to be the owner of a company that was doing that right now, sort of like flouting what the U.S. government is doing. Secondly, unfortunately, the byproduct of putting economic pressure on the Russian government is that the Russian people bear the consequences, and it's not their fault. But there's no way to sort of levy economic, difficulties against the Russian government without it affecting the Russian people too. Mm-hmm. This is really all about preventing Moscow from, as Pam said, funneling a lot of those profits into continued war against Ukraine and destruction there. I think we also talked about a couple weeks ago how the ruble had been really destabilized, and that one of the, early goals at that point was to prevent Putin from being able to access something. It was like $600 billion that they had sort of on reserve to help fight inflation if it ever hit Russia. It's cutting sort of like the top tier in Moscow off from accessing those funds. So it needs to happen. Unfortunately, the upshot is that it's going to impact everyone who lives there, even the people who aren't responsible for this.
Yeah.
And there are probably, to your point, Andrew, people who feel that this will galvanize the Russian population to realize that they're being lied to and potentially, pursue sort of like an assassination. Yeah,
or
overthrow the government. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we talked a little bit about this in our Slack, and the decision has since been rolled back. But last week, Meta announced that it was going to temporarily relax its restrictions around certain kinds of hate speech, in particular, threats of violence against Russian invaders in Ukraine, and also calls to assassinate Vladimir Putin and the president of Belarus, whose name is escaping me right now. They've since rolled back on that because it's not a great look. And a lot of people were kind of looking askance at it. Like, why are you trying to stir the pot? Like, what is this doing?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that is a motivation. Wait, Alexander Lukashenko. Thank you, Chloe.
They were going to allow those forms of speech?
Yeah.
What did you say? And what would happen if people started calling for Trump or Biden to be assassinated? Would they allow that on Facebook? What the F?
No, it was specifically with regard to the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Yeah, but still, I just mean it's a slippery slope.
Oh, I totally agree. When I heard about it, I was like, are you guys insane?
Yeah.
There are already people thinking of doing that. We don't need to encourage it. It's already happening.
Yeah, let Lindsay take care of it. He's already said it like 2-3 times at this point.
My God. Lindsey Graham, like, I can't.
Yeah.
We could have a whole episode about what a fucking clown he is.
So those are a couple things we wanted to bring up. I'll end on sort of a good note. I think a lot of people have observed this at this point. Ukraine has been doing a great job fighting back. I don't think anyone would have predicted that they would have done such a good job against Russia. I mean, it's freaking Russia. You would think they would have been able to have their shit together in terms of their effectiveness in winning this war, but it hasn't gone particularly well for them yet. And on the other hand, it is worrying because then you wonder, well, if Putin notices he's losing or not doing as well as he may have expected, what's he going to do next?
Yeah, I just want to say, and this is my last thought on this, President Zelensky of Ukraine put out a video the other day. It ended up on TikTok. Don't know if it was there originally, but he was praising the United States for all of its efforts thus far. And I was like, oh my God, that feels so good. We're doing the right thing, guys. We're actually doing the right thing for once. So that felt really good. I also noticed that right now on Twitter, Zelensky Democrat is trending, similar to how you might see someone identify as like an Elizabeth Warren Democrat. There are people calling themselves Zelensky Democrats.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a weird time to be alive.
Better than continuing to call him a daddy, I guess. I think everybody's moved on from that.
Everyone's moved on from Zaddy.
After hearing our serious discussion on the topic.
That's right. Thirst in your own time.
In private, please. Well, Pam, I'm glad you brought up the Disney angle because I want to talk about a different Disney story that don't say gay bill and their reaction or lack thereof to that. We're going to do that in a moment. But first, Apostrophe is back to sponsor this week's episode. And I'm so excited that they are because, y'all, they really do work. At least they have for me so far. A couple weeks ago, I told you about Apostrophe and why I was excited to try them. I have had acne forever, and I have not been able to get rid of it with various creams and options that I found in the skincare aisle. I've been dealing with it for 15, 20 years, just very difficult to get rid of. With Apostrophe, you get to work with a dermatologist right through their website. You upload photos of your skin, so you take a couple selfies, and they review the photos and a questionnaire that you fill out, and then they prescribe some medicine for you. In my case, I was prescribed a certain cream and an antibiotic. My dermatologist suggested that I use both to start to be aggressive at the outset, but it really worked. I honestly have had no breakouts since I started this cream and antibiotic. I keep touching my face because I keep expecting to feel a pimple coming through and nothing. And I shouldn't be touching my face, but nothing. I'm not feeling any pimples. I haven't seen any pimples. It really honestly shocks me because I'm always getting pimples every couple days. And by the way, I'm starting the cream. I'm starting the antibiotic. I haven't made any other changes. I haven't changed my diet. I haven't changed my lifestyle. I still wash my face morning and night, but I've made no other changes. This stuff is really working for me thanks to Apostrophe. Apostrophe connects you with a board-certified dermatologist who will create a personalized treatment plan that is perfectly tailored to your unique skin. This is personalized, real care that you're getting, and now I can attest to the effectiveness of the care I'm receiving so far. And I'm very much looking forward to continuing. I'm going to meet again with the dermatologist in a month or two. We'll see. Like right now, I still have a little bit of redness, no pimples, but I do have redness. It's only been 2-3 weeks though. So I think my face is still processing not having acne for the first time in a while. So I'm hopeful that the redness is just going to go away on its own, but we'll see. We have a very special deal for our audience. Save $15 off your first visit with an apostrophe provider at apostrophe.com/MILL when you use our code MILL. This code is only available to our listeners. To get started, just go to apostrophe.com/MILL and click begin visit. Then use our code MILL at sign up and you'll get your first visit for only $5. This is a great deal. That's apostrophe.com/MILL and use that code MILL to get your dermatologist certified treatment plan for $5. And we thank Apostrophe for sponsoring the podcast. Our next story today, I mentioned Disney, they've been in some hot water over their response or the initial lack thereof to Florida's Don't Say Gay bill. Have you two been following the developments? Laura, it's only a state away from you.
Oh, yeah. Well, and it does impact my state as well, as we'll get into over the course of the conversation. I can't say that this is shocking to me living in the Southeast United States. This is certainly not the first, nor will it be the last time that anti-gay legislation is passed in some form or fashion. I wish that it weren't the case, but it is.
Yeah. So to catch everybody up, Florida's Don't Say Gay bill, as it is named by critics. And by the way, great name. Seriously, great way to spin this because it's really effective. It prohibits classroom discussion on sexual orientation and gender identity in kindergarten through 3rd grade. Additionally, the bill states classroom instruction that is not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students would be banned among teachers from all grade levels. So this is a very broad bill, and it's not very specific. And that's one of the many problems here. The bill recently was passed by the Florida Senate and is expected to be signed by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Now, when this bill started making the rounds, it was getting a lot of attention online. The name Don't Say Gay, which is not the official name, it's what the left named it. Like I said, great idea in all seriousness. People started asking why Disney had been so quiet about it because they do operate a massive tourism business in the state. And they recently started forcing other employees from California to move to Florida. And obviously, they have a lot of creatives and they have a lot of people who work for them who are LGBTQ+. So it was very disappointing that they were dead silent on the issue. They also make donations to numerous Florida reps, including those who backed the bill. So there was a lot of momentum around asking why Disney was staying quiet. And so on March 2nd, The Hollywood Reporter managed to get a statement out of reps for Disney CEO Bob Chapek. So this wasn't Bob, this was Bob's reps. And the first statement was absolutely horrible. We actually have an audio clip.
Whatever Bob's personal politics are, he's not an activist and does not bring any partisan agenda to work. He sees himself first and foremost as the custodian of a unifying brand that for nearly a century has been bringing people together. And he is determined that Disney remain a place where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. He believes the best way we can help create a more inclusive world is through the inspiring content we produce, bro. The welcoming culture we create, and the diverse community organizations we support.
So there were a couple moments in this statement that really upset people. Bob does not bring any partisan agenda to work.
Please.
And then this other line, he believes the best way we can help create a more inclusive world is through the inspiring content we produce. Basically saying our films are so diverse and send so many wonderful messages that we don't need to make any comments about the Don't Say Gay bill.
There's so many gays in Disney films, right?
Yeah, I mean, think of that little lesbian kiss in the background of the one Star Wars movie, blink and you miss it. Yeah, we're impacting lots of change.
Also, if you're going to go so far as to bring up the fact that your brand is nearly a century old and then talk about how your films are inclusive and diverse and treat people with dignity and respect, we all remember Song of the South. I mean, we don't actually remember it because none of us here were old enough to have seen it when y'all didn't lock it away and prevent people from seeing it. But that is a thing, right? You can't like sort of brush the history of your company under the rug, act like it didn't happen and be like, oh, but in present day, we're being super diverse when you're fucking not.
So lots of backlash. Ugh. Like I said, it was so infuriating. Then on March 7th, Chapek emailed employees. So now this is Chapek himself.
I want to be crystal clear. I and the entire leadership team unequivocally stand in support of our LGBTQ plus employees, their families, and their communities. And we are committed to creating a more inclusive company and world. As we've seen time and time again, corporate statements do very little to change outcomes or minds. Instead, they're often weaponized by one side or the other to further divide and inflame. Simply put, they can be counterproductive and undermine more effective ways to achieve change.
So he still didn't come out against the Don't Say Gay bill. And this was an internal email. So, you know, of course it was going to leak, but it wasn't a big statement like everyone had been asking for. Disney is the largest, one of the largest businesses in Florida. They can impact change if they want to. I did read a report from the Miami Herald that they were working behind the scenes to try and get this bill adjusted, but clearly it didn't work. And when you have so many queer employees working for you, you want your employer to say something about a bill like this that has, I'll use the phrase again this episode, a very slippery slope. This is a very broad and vague bill that could be twisted in lots of ways. Disney also said they would make sizable donations to numerous causes, including the Human Rights Campaign. What was incredible about that, though, was that the HRC quickly said they would not accept the donation until they did better. So the HRC said, no thanks, Disney. You can do better. Now, around the same time, this is where things, as if they weren't bad enough, it just would not stop for Disney. A letter from queer employees at Pixar leaked in which it was alleged that, quote, Disney corporate executives have demanded cuts from nearly every moment of overtly gay affection, regardless of when there is protests from both the creative teams and executive leadership at Pixar. Damn.
I mean, that's not surprising, but it is disheartening.
Especially to hear it directly from people at Pixar.
Right, exactly.
Around the same time, they pulled all business out of Russia, which I saw somebody comment on Twitter, what happened to tackling the world's problems with inspiring content that you produce? You're pulling business out of Russia, pull business out of Florida in protest of this bill.
Yeah, but that would actually cost them more money, Andrew.
Oh, and they'd have to move Cinderella's castle. Yeah, I
right,
forgot about that.
Right.
Okay. Well,
and listen, Disney is like probably the number one tourist attraction in the state of Florida. So probably in exchange for that, I have to imagine that Disney's in good with their representatives.
Exactly.
Right?
They have power there. Yeah, they really could if they really tried. So backlash continued. And finally, on March 11th, Chapek released another statement to employees, this time apologizing to staff for his handling of the situation.
You needed me to be a stronger ally in the fight for equal rights, and I let you down. I am sorry. I missed the mark in this case, but I'm an ally you can count on, and I will be an outspoken champion for the protections, visibility, and opportunity you deserve. Starting immediately, we are increasing our support for advocacy groups to combat similar legislation in other states. We are hard at work creating a new framework for our political giving that will ensure our advocacy better reflects our values. And today, we are pausing all political donations in the state of Florida pending this review. But I know there is so much more work to be done. I am committed to this work and to you all, and we will continue to engage with the LGBTQ plus community so that I can become a better ally. You will hear more about our progress in the coming weeks.
Man, I have to say, I think Mickey's nuts must have been up around his navel while he was recording this, because
he was fired up.
Yeah.
Laura and Pam were laughing their asses off during those statements,
Oh my
particularly
God. I
that
was
last
not
one.
expecting that. I was crying.
Me too.
I was like, this is a lot to read on air, especially after doing the ad. Maybe I should ask Laura to do some impressions. And I was like, I don't want to put her on the spot, so let me just do all these myself.
It was great. Oh, man. You deserve an award for that.
James said that too. Thanks. So anyway, this was a good statement, but it's not written by Bob. It didn't come from his heart. They probably got a crisis PR team involved, because this statement is such a far cry from the original one, where Bob doesn't get involved in partisan issues. You know, this is him saying, I made a mistake. I apologize. We're making changes immediately. We're no longer donating to Florida politicians pending further review. We'll have to see what happens now. I mean, this is not the end of this story. We'll have to see, you know, does Bob release another statement when Ron DeSantis actually signs this bill into law?
I think, to your point, what's the scariest about this is that it is so broad, and it sort of leaves room for state education boards to make these unilateral decisions about what is age appropriate, which makes me wonder, for example, if, you know, a child reading an otherwise age appropriate book that maybe features a gay character who is not participating in any inappropriate sexual behavior, maybe that book gets banned, but then a similar book with a straight character doesn't, because straight is what's considered quote unquote normal for proponents of this kind of bill. It's like, we only want to see sort of what society deems as the default setting for humanity. And anything that doesn't live up to that is age inappropriate for our kids. And there are so many children who have parents who are gay, parents who might be non-binary, that we've discussed this time and time again, that there is such a spectrum when it comes to identity and orientation and attraction. And the second that you take everything off the table, except for the heteronormative teachings around, you know, the 1950s style nuclear unit of family, you're not representing the children that are in your schools, because not everyone comes from a household like that. But you're also boxing people in to make them think that life can only be a certain kind of way. So you're placing limitations on those children too. You're not allowing them to see the world represented as it is. So there's just a ton of damage that come from these kinds of bills. And it just seems like it's a great excuse to limit literature, media, lessons that maybe someone at the top of the state legislature just doesn't like. It's the same thing when critical race theory kind of became the buzzword for any time someone's having a conversation about race, they're talking about critical race theory, which is not true.
Yeah.
It's the same thing that's going on here.
I think that we've seen time and time again how education done the right way breeds empathy. And so not only is something like this Don't Say Gay bill letting down the queer children that have the unfortunate, that are unfortunately stuck in the Florida school system, but it's also letting down everybody that isn't gay that has to go through the system as well, because you're not allowing them to, like Laura said, see that there are all different kinds of people in this world and they're all deserving of respect. And how are you supposed to know that as a child? And how are you supposed to do better than your parents if they have different views? If you literally have educators in your state saying that it's not appropriate to learn about these kinds of people.
Yeah.
So it's just awful all around. And I don't know what's going to happen here, but I hope that there's some way to to reverse this because it's just a disservice to everybody involved.
If only there was a big corporation that had so much business in the state that could really make an impact here.
Yeah, and I think what's going to be interesting here is to see what the reaction of, major corporate leaders is going to be to this. There was actually another anti-gay piece of legislation that was introduced in our legislature in 2016. And it was different from the Don't Say Gay bill. This one, it was House Bill 757, would have given faith-based organizations in Georgia the option to deny services to gay people. A number of major companies, including Disney, threatened to pull business out of the state if this bill were to pass. So it didn't. So I just think it's funny that they're capable of doing that when the state that it's happening in just so happens not to be the state where Cinderella's castle lives.
Right. And in the case of that bill, I mean, that bill seems really extreme. This one's bad, but it's not as bad as that one from a few years ago. So maybe, they found a certain line.
Well, I hope they learn from it.
I know. Well, we'll see. We'll see, right? Like, Bob Chapek, he's only been in the CEO role for about a year-ish. There's a long crossover period with Bob Iger, who's actually been outspoken against this bill, even though he's no longer involved with Disney. We'll see what Disney does after this bill gets inevitably signed. Or maybe Bob's, if I'm being optimistic, which I do try to be, maybe he is on the phone with Florida legislatures trying to talk them off the ledge here. Maybe he will be able to make a change. And if he does, wow.
I mean,
it took him a while, but yeah, I know.
That's the thing. Money talks at the end of the day. So if he really wants to throw the weight of the mouse around, he can. 100%. It's just a question of will he?
Florida legislators. I was saying legislatures earlier. Anyway, so that's what's going on there. We'll keep everybody posted as this story develops.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting through line that we can maybe see into this next story that we're going to talk about, where it seems like every few years there's sort of like a backslide, maybe sort of in terms of how open-minded people are. Could be, the result of something major happening to us socially and culturally over the last few years or so. But I saw this study out of Pew Research Center that was really interesting that indicates that rising shares of Americans see women raising children on their own and cohabitation without marriage as bad for society. So this is actually comparing to an earlier study from 2018, and shows that Americans are more likely than they were 3 years ago to say that single women raising children on their own and couples living together without being married are bad for society. This study was just done in October of 2021, so it is very recent. What I thought was really interesting here, digging in a little further, is that the share of births to unmarried women has remained stable over the past decade, and yet Pew saw a 7% increase in Americans saying that single women raising children alone is generally bad for society. I thought this was super interesting because one of the, largest increases in single motherhood happened, in the 1980s and 1990s, and in the 2000s has remained pretty stable. And yet there seems to be some kind of growing perception around how many of these instances there are, and also sort of, perceptions around whether or not this is a good thing. So just for comparison, 47% of respondents in 2021 said that single motherhood was bad for society compared to 40% in 2018. And we also have some of the results broken down by demographic here, which we can chat about if it comes up. But I just wanted to get y'all's take on this first and foremost. I personally was a little taken aback by it because I think when you grow up sort of as a normal person in a normal society, you see all kinds of families and different family structures that exist and work. And I've never once thought of any of them as being bad, as long as people were safe and happy and provided for. So what's y'all's take?
I'm particularly surprised by the idea of this because it's not like divorce rates are going down. So
right.
What do all of these people think happens to those children when parents divorce?
Yeah.
I'm so stunned by this. So I don't get the disconnect there. It's like divorce is so normalized that you would think that this would be a non-issue. If anything, you would think that the poll would be going down.
Right.
Yeah.
I was thinking maybe when people are being posed these questions, are they considering, well, it's more difficult to be a single parent because you don't have the support of a second person. So for that reason, it's bad for society. I'm wondering maybe they don't really think it's bad for society. They think it's more difficult to raise a child when there's only one of you.
Yeah, that was something that I wanted to pose to y'all. Just sort of thinking about the fact that a very similar study was done in 2018 pre-pandemic. And now we have this new set of data that came from like the midst of the pandemic. I'm wondering if it's possible that the pandemic had an impact on this increase somehow. Like maybe people are, in their pandemic mindset and getting nervous. And we know psychologically that when people feel threatened, they become more conservative. So I wonder if that's part of it. And through that conservatism, people are leaning back on, again, what we just talked about, that heteronormative idea of what a family unit should look like. I also do find it interesting that, no one in this study, and this would be one of my critiques of the study, talks about single fatherhood, because we have seen an increase in single fathers over the last decade or so. It's interesting that the narrative, post-divorce, to Pam's point, always seems to be about single mothers, and that this idea of single parenthood isn't one that's occurring to people. Is there any other nuance y'all think we can pick out of this that might have influenced this increase for people?
Well, in regards to the pandemic, you said maybe the pandemic changed people's perceptions. I'm also wondering, when you were talking about that a couple minutes ago, maybe because it was difficult and still remains difficult for a lot of people to be working and taking care of a child at home because they can't go to school. That's why people's perceptions changed, because we know that was a very difficult situation for people to deal with, still is. And that's why on both the right and left, you saw tons of people calling for schools to reopen.
Yeah.
But see, the thing is that also implies that one of the two parents is able to stay home with the kids. And for most people, that's not feasibly possible. It takes a sizable amount of income to make sure that one of you can be a stay-at-home parent, whether that's the dad or the mom.
Well,
I just, I know it does make things easier. At least you could afford childcare. For if you're more likely to be able to afford childcare if you're a 2 household income, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you can. And I don't know. I just think that there's a lot of blind spots here if that would be the way that people would be considering this.
But just to clarify, it's not just stay-at-home parents. It's also parents who during the pandemic had to work from home. And you balance working from home with taking care of a child who's being forced to stay home. That makes an incredibly difficult situation as well. That's all I was getting at.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting for this kind of study if breaking the topic down with respondents to not just be this overall topic of single motherhood, if there was more nuance to the things that people were responding to. Like, could we argue that some of the causes of single parenthood are bad for society? For example, maybe, but like, do we really want to force people into unhealthy marriages just so they can check the box and say this is a 2-parent household? Like, that's not good for society. That's not good for kids. We've got a couple of people sounding off in the Discord being like, yeah, my parents are divorced because my dad cheated and left us. Like, that would not have been a healthy situation for a child to grow up in. So it just feels like there's a lot of nuance missing from this. And it just makes me think that people are scared.
I also think about this in terms of, like Roe versus Wade being called into question and abortion rights being such a hot topic right now. It's a really scary time for women when you look at it from that angle. So I also find it particularly interesting that here's this study that says that, the majority of the people that participated don't think that women should raise kids on their own. But at the same time, half the country would want a mother to give birth no matter what, regardless of whether they had a partner. So like, again, like, where does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. It's an interesting contradiction for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And something else I just wanted to call out, because I know a couple of folks who've done this personally. There are more people choosing single parenthood in today's day and age. And I think about how seeing this kind of data must make them feel, if for whatever reason they decided, maybe they're aromantic, for example, or they just don't see themselves in a committed relationship and they still want to be a parent. Seeing the data say, a slight majority of American respondents to this say that single parenthood is a bad thing. When it's deeper than that, and there's more nuance into digging into like, what are actually the bad things for society?
And pretty insulting.
Yeah, it is, right?
When these single parents are trying their damnedest to, raise their child.
I mean, like, I'm personally a little insulted. My grandma was a single mother for a while.
Mm-hmm.
She got divorced and she got married young and she got divorced. My mom was also a single parent. I know so many single parents. I'm sure you all do too, because again, divorce is very common in this country.
Mm-hmm.
It's like half of all marriages.
Right.
Yeah.
And in divorce. Right. There's a reason for that statistic. So, it just kind of very much seems like an archaic viewpoint to insinuate that, you can only raise children as a unit, as a traditional family unit.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's completely insane. And I mean, to your point, Pam, I feel like all of my friends, and I'm not trying to put anyone on blast here. So, and I do have a couple friends who listen to the show, but all of my friends who got married in their 20s are now divorced. Every single one of them.
Yeah.
So it's like, and some of them have kids. It's incredibly common. So if we want to start getting into the things that are bad for society, let's talk about sort of like the social pressure forcing people into marriages they're not ready for.
Pam, you may have brought this up once or twice. Family members are like, when do you get married? When do you get married?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Never.
Oh, my gosh, y'all.
Maybe never.
So my brother, he comes out to visit me every once in a while. And he likes having serious talks when we take walks in the woods. We were not 2 minutes into our latest bro on bro walk in the woods when he says, so when are you getting married? I'm like, maybe I don't want to get married. Why are you asking me that so quickly? Just because I've been with somebody for a couple of years, it doesn't mean it's time to get married. Leave me alone.
I'll let you know when I have an update for you.
Yeah, really. You don't need to ask me when I'm getting married. I'll tell you. Spoiler alert. Maybe never.
Well, it's funny you mention that because, my brother has been telling our whole family for years that he doesn't want to get married.
Mm.
Yeah.
So, and he's just like, I'm not opposed to having a long-term partner, but I don't want to get married. And that doesn't mean I might not want to have kids with that person, but I don't want to get married. I don't believe in marriage. I've grown up with divorce all around me. I'd rather just know that I am committed to that person and I'm fine with that.
Exactly.
And I guess you do give up some rights when you're not legally married, but for him, it's just
you gotta weigh those. You just gotta weigh it all.
He weighs out the options, and that's how he feels. So,
and you know what, though? He doesn't have to get married to get those protections. He needs to go to a good lawyer and have them write up. I know there are contractual agreements that can be written up that effectively give you the same benefits and protections that you would get from marriage. And I will say, he wouldn't be able to take advantage of the tax benefits if he's not legally married according to,
that's true.
The state. But in terms of, hospital visitation, custody, property, he can have all of those things written into a contract and he'll be fine. And it's funny that we kind of started talking about relationships because this same study actually also found that Americans are also more likely than they were in 2018 to say cohabitation without marriage is also generally bad for society. This is even with cohabitation on the rise over the last couple of decades. So it was 24% said that cohabitation without marriage was bad for society in 2021 compared to only 19% in 2018. And I thought, since we're on the younger end of these results, they polled, men, women, also across a variety of racial demographics and then age groups, as well as the two major political parties. I thought we could talk about what are the most important reasons that we see ourselves and our friends opting to cohabitate unmarried.
I just don't love the idea of that legal commitment. I like a little more flexibility in my life. I see a lot of people getting divorced. I don't want to go through that. I don't like the attention around getting married. We were talking about this before recording today, and it's on Patreon. I hate posting on social media, period. I just don't like attention, and I don't want the attention of a marriage. Just, there's a lot of reasons like that for me. I don't really see the point. I haven't been compelled. I don't judge anybody who does, but right now, it's not for me.
Yeah, I think that before getting married kind of symbolized this big life turning point. And for some people, it still does. But if you're looking at it from way back in the day, that was usually the moment you moved out of your house and moved in with your partner. And, nowadays, you don't really have to do that to get married. It's not a situation that's frowned upon. I think that it's perfectly fine to live with your partner before you choose to do that, or maybe you never choose to do that. Some people are just happy vibing as they are, and I don't think that's a bad thing. So if something's working, it's working. I don't think that necessarily that means that you need to get married. It's funny. It is funny how it's usually the people around you that are asking, though.
I know, everybody.
And then the asking is leaves no room for them to just, it's almost like assuming that you all are not happy unless you're planning to get married.
Yeah.
But that's not the case.
I think I think it's a huge generational shift, because when I think about it, speaking personally, yes, Mark and I are eventually planning on getting married. No, we're not in any particular rush. We're also not doing it because we feel like it's going to mark some big, turning of a corner in our relationship, or that it's going to change anything. If you feel like getting married is going to drastically change your relationship, you need to reevaluate that decision. It shouldn't change any of the dynamics. Mark is my life partner. I distinctly feel that way. And us getting married changes nothing apart from making sure that we have, those legal protections and rights that I talked about with Pam before. So it's just not what it used to be for people. So I think older generations, when they're talking about getting married, they see it as this momentous change in your relationship status, when I think a lot of younger generations don't view it that way, because we're doing a test run of living with our partners before we make that legal commitment to them.
Yeah. Or the younger generations do think it's going to change their relationship and improve it. And then they get married and nothing changes. You're just as miserable as you were before you got married. It gets worse. You're right. Because now you got all this extra baggage involved with the marriage. I do think not everybody, but sometimes there are couples or people who think getting married or maybe having a kid is going to improve their life. And sometimes they find that actually the marriage did not improve anything. I don't quote me on the exact numbers, but I saw a study a few months ago that said having a kid actually makes X number of parents less happy because there's a lot of stresses with having a kid. Yeah. I wasn't surprised by that. I particularly worry about people, whether it's a kid or marriage, people who are getting into it thinking it's going to fix things. I'm really glad you brought that up because it won't always do that. If it's a big life achievement for you, like a moment you've been hoping for all your life, great. Like if that makes you happier, great. But it's not a Band-Aid.
No, it's definitely not. And especially with the example of a child, bringing a newborn baby into your relationship doesn't alleviate pressure from your relationship. It adds to it. I'm not even a parent, and I know that just from seeing my friends who've had kids who are in stable and loving relationships, but it's still stressful having to care for a child. Just like it's stressful, you know, if you haven't really thought through the terms of what it means to get married and then you just do it because you think that it's sort of like the magical, you know, bow tie on top of your relationship that makes everything shiny and perfect. It's not. So I think that's the major difference between people in the younger generations and people in older generations that we saw surveyed in this poll. These two things just made me roll my eyes. I trust Pew's reporting, their data. I trust their research methods. So I think what we're seeing here is sound data, but it just makes me roll my eyes at the American public because we do this every fucking time something scary happens, aka a pandemic. We become more conservative because we want to retreat into like our tribalistic tendencies to be like, no, we do what is safe, you know, instead of thinking about things, you know, critically and with nuance. So I love Pew, but I don't love this study.
Laura's disappointed. She's divorcing Pew.
No. I mean, it's not Pew. It's the respondents.
Well, speaking of people that maybe shouldn't have been married or should have called it quits a while ago, there's this crazy story out of California that is a couple of years in the making. And it was so insane that we thought it'd be funny to bring it up here. So you can consider this as a bit of a resurgence to the age-old segment WTF News. And our story starts in 2016. There's a 34-year-old mother out of Redding, California, who disappeared while jogging. And all they found where she had been jogging was her cell phone and her earbuds that had been kind of discarded on the side of the road. It sparked a nationwide search, as these stories tend to do, especially when the women are white, especially if they are mothers with children. Obviously, this pulled at a lot of people's heartstrings. And you know, there was a lot of effort put into trying to see if they could find her. But it turns out they didn't need to look very hard because she reappeared 3 weeks later on Thanksgiving Day. She actually flagged down a driver about 150 miles away from her home. She was found with chains around her. She was severely bruised up. Her hair was cut shorter. There was a brand on her as well. And she told authorities that she had been kidnapped by 2 armed Hispanic women. And so, of course, the FBI put out some sketches and they started searching for the captors. And turns out that there was no need because they just revealed last week that she had faked everything. And the reason that she did this was so she could go hang out with her ex-boyfriend for 22 days. And she inflicted all of these wounds on herself to make the story more convincing. And she was finally arrested last week. So that's the story.
She was charged for lying. That's pretty good.
Yeah, she's out on bail. Yeah, but she was arrested on charges of lying to federal agents. And also there's a state victim compensation board in California. And so she's also charged for defrauding them out of $30,000 because she took the relief fund money as well.
Good.
Yeah. Wow, this sounds like something straight out of a movie, but with like two teenagers being like, let's run away and not tell anybody, and we're just going to be left alone, and Bobby's not going to bother us anymore. Come on, X, let's do it.
I know.
Just get back together with your ex. I'm so confused.
I know. Tell your husband you're leaving and just go with the person you want to be with.
Well, so that begs the question, is she getting a divorce now?
Well, that I don't know.
Maybe I hope so.
We need to have a WTF News update at some point.
If I were her partner, I would be divorcing her ass.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is pretty bad. This is a whole other level of cheating. This is wow. Oh, man. This story, though, I do feel like every once in a while, I don't seriously consider it, of course. It would be nice to just kind of disappear for a while, just not have any responsibilities, just kind of be invisible out there.
Yeah, that's when you go unplugged on a vacation, but you make sure the people who are important to you know where you are.
Yeah.
And you turn off your cell phone and just be disconnected. That's the healthy way to do this.
Be a man of the woods, living off the grid.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Next time Ryan wants to go on one of those bro walks with you.
Are you getting married?
Just disappear.
Yeah.
Just tell Pat where you're going, and then Pat can tell everybody who asks. He's fine. He just doesn't want to be found right now.
He wants me to tell everybody he's missing, but I'm not going to do that. But just like pretend that I told you that and that I'm all concerned, but really he's fine.
In reality, you're just like chilling in the basement. You've never left your house.
Now, wait. There's something here in the doc I got to call out. What is this about fantasizing about faking your own death?
Well, this was something that Andrew brought up when we were talking about this. Well, it's documented in our editorial meeting from last week.
I think
so I put this in just for you.
I've been evolving what exactly I want to say on air. I think it would be interesting. Now, I wouldn't fantasize about it. I don't think I said that. Maybe I did. I was in a different mood that day. But it would be interesting to see how people react to your death if you faked your death or you faked that you've gone missing. I wouldn't actually
want to hear
do it.
the eulogies or something?
No, it's just because like when we die, of course, we don't hear any of that stuff. And everybody's so nice.
For you. You're dead.
Right, exactly.
Well, I mean, it is about you, though.
But it's not for you.
Related to this, one of the first assignments I ever had in journalism school was we got paired up with somebody else in the class and we had to write an obituary for each other.
Oh.
And then we had to like interview people that they gave us a list from. So it could be like a best friend, a brother, a significant other, a parent. Very morbid, but also very interesting to see how those obits turned out and like what people would say about you if they were asked questions. So
yeah.
I guess I kind of get the curiosity, but it's also very morbid.
So I feel like all of us have toxic traits, right? Like everybody has one. Andrew, I think this might be yours. I mean, you wrote in the notes, wouldn't it be nice to see how people react to your death?
Look, it's been a long day. That's what I was feeling at the moment when I wrote that. Okay.
What if you didn't like the reaction?
I would
though?
Cry.
What if I don't like the reaction?
I would cry.
We would cry.
Aww.
Yeah, of course I would cry.
Yeah.
But yeah, what if you didn't like other people's reactions? What if somebody was like, ha, loser?
Y'all would only be
like
crying because you'd be trying to log into our podcast host and like you couldn't figure out the password. You're like, what is it? On hour 15?
You don't have one of us set as a legacy contact? This is what I'm hearing.
On the podcast host? Oh, like for my phone? Yeah, maybe I should do that. Figure out how to pass all the passwords on. No, you all have the passwords. But
yeah,
I just think it'd be interesting to see. Like, I'm not serious. I'm not thinking of doing it. I'm just saying it'd be interesting. It'd be nice to disappear and be left alone. And it would be nice to see how everybody reacts to your death. Because people always say the nice stuff, right? They only say it when you're gone.
Not John Cleese. Did you see his eulogy of Graham Chapman back in the day?
No.
That shit was fucking hilarious. I highly recommend, if you haven't seen it, look up John Cleese's eulogy of Graham Chapman. They're two of the members of Monty Python. It was super funny. And honestly, I would love it if someone eulogized me in that way because, you know, death is not fun. So you might as well help people get a laugh out of it if you can.
Well, Laura, we've had a couple exciting weeks on Patreon, if I don't say so myself.
Yeah, we have. And before we wrap up the show tonight, we wanted to take a second to give some love to our Patreon, where we've got hundreds of hours of bonus content at your fingertips. The latest additions are our March variety show, where we totally fail at Wordle, and our upcoming edition of After Dark, where we will be reading some Am I the Asshole submissions. Our Patreon isn't just a place where we have a ton of fun with our show supporters, but it's also our show's bread and butter and how we're able to make getting the show out to y'all weekly a priority. We are so thankful for all of our supporters and wanted to give a special shout out this week to our latest patrons. They are Jessica, Alicia, Elise, Greta, Ilhan, Yuki, Emma, Beth, Diana, Cherie, Dosh, Linnea, Jill, Michael, Caroline, Steph, Elizabeth, Roxanne, Mike, and Elena. Thank you so much for joining our Patreon. And we are so thankful to have y'all in our community of listener supporters. And it seems like y'all enjoy tea because a lot of you joined after last week's Mugglesuck edition. So
it was a good
look
one.
Forward to more of that. We love talking shit.
That's a good way to end it. We love talking shit. I want to recommend this great infographic from Vox.com. I think they've had this for a while, but obviously it's been resurfaced with this new bill that was passed in the Senate. It shows what would happen in America if we stopped changing the clocks. So you see the entire country, and you see this kind of visual chart, and it depicts days with sunrises before 7 a.m. and days with sunsets after 5 p.m. And it shows these days if we keep daylight saving time as it exists, if we got rid of daylight saving time, and if we used daylight saving time all year. So this is a really helpful way to look at your own area and see how many days you're going to have with sun before 7 a.m. and after 5 p.m. if we make any changes or none at all. So check it out. We have a link in the show notes.
I want to recommend going to the dentist. I know over the last couple of years with the pandemic, going to the dentist may not have been a priority for people. And also with, the uncertainty around transmission of COVID, you might not have felt comfortable going to the dentist. I just went to the dentist for the first time in a couple of years the other day. I'm okay, but I did find out that I need my wisdom teeth out. So yeah, that's gonna suck. But it's not gonna be cheap. So I feel like with the dentist, it's just good to just go get the preventative care that you need, and don't let the bills stack up on you. And also, I just want to shout out the dentist office I went to. It's like they're doing a great job with just like COVID safety precautions and things like that. And I have to think that most dental offices are doing the same.
Yeah, that's a good rec. It's been a little while for me as well, also because of the pandemic and moving. So I hadn't gotten set up with a new dentist yet. I need to seriously take that rec from you.
And I wanted to recommend Abbott Elementary on ABC if you're looking for something cute to watch. It's a sitcom and it's set up like a mockumentary like The Office or Parks and Rec. It actually just got picked up for a second season, I believe, yesterday. So it's a good time to catch up if you haven't checked it out yet. It's really, really fun, and it follows a group of teachers at a really badly off public school out in Philadelphia. And they all just like really love teaching, and it's really funny and heartwarming and great. So check it out if you're looking for something to watch.
I've seen a few episodes because I've seen so much talk on Twitter about it, and it is really good, really funny. I recommended it to my sister very quickly because she's a teacher near Philadelphia and loves The Office. So it was just like right up her alley.
For her.
Yeah. All right. If you have any feedback about today's episode, you can write directly to millennialshow@gmail.com, or you can use the contact form or anonymous confessional on millennialshow.com. And also follow us on social media. We are Millennial Show on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and over on TikTok, we are Millennial Pod. So check them all out. Thanks, everybody, for listening. I'm Andrew.
I'm Laura.
And I'm Pamela.
Bye, everyone.
See ya.